Good evening, everyone. I'm Armina Chiparian, the city manager for the city of South Pasadena. I want to welcome everyone to this informational meeting on Senate Bill 381, which was signed into law on September 28th this year and provides both tenants and the city with additional tools for the disposition of surplus Caltrans properties located in the city of South Pasadena. I want to take a moment and sincerely thank Senator Portantino for all his leadership and tremendous efforts that advanced the bill through several committees, and for being here tonight to help us share very important information regarding the bill. Tonight's meeting is meant to provide the public with a better understanding of the legislation. The city has teamed up with the senator's office to present on the key elements of the bill and address common questions and concerns, and hopefully put everyone at ease. This is a community informational meeting, not a notice council meeting. The city council may listen, but will not be making comments as to not to violate the Brown Act. The city plans to hold future meetings for the community to generate additional input and develop policies related to the acquisition of unoccupied properties. There are some ground rules that I'd like to share. We want to be mindful of the senators as well as your time. The meeting will be 90 minutes. There will be several opportunities for comments and questions. In addition, you can submit questions and comments to the city email, which will be provided throughout the meeting. The meeting is recorded and will be posted on the city's website. I now want to take a moment and turn it over to Senator Portantino as he has some opening remarks.
Thank you, City Manager Chiparian. It's good to see you again, and happy to be here. And I want to say thank you to the 63 people who logged on tonight to hear about this. The public participation component of SB 381 has been very important, both to the city of South Pass and to my office. I mean, we've had a number of public comment Zoom meetings. I know the city has had a number of agendized formal city council meetings where we've been able to hear the concerns and the questions of the public throughout the process, and amended the bill as appropriate throughout the entire process. And the input in particular from the historic preservation folks has been very important to getting us to where we're at. We've also had to work within the framework of the administration and the governor's office, and they have been very supportive and moved significantly from where they were. And again, that's a testament to South Pasadena's passion to get Caltrans out of the landlord business, to protect the tenants. I think that's been the overriding and overarching goal of all of us, is that the existing tenants should be protected and they should move up in the pecking order. And that's what 381 did. I know the mayor and the city council and community activists were very concerned about the historic homes and adding the South Pass list to the current list that Caltrans had, and the bill was successful in doing that. It's a framework. I know over the weekend there were concerns about the rulemaking for the city of LA part, and that rulemaking did not affect what's going to happen in South Pass. So I think that's important for people to grapple with. There's the city of LA piece, there's the South Pass piece, and there's the Pasadena piece. What we're here to focus on tonight is the South Pass specific piece, and South Pass and the tenants in South Pass had specific concerns, and we've tried to address those throughout the process. And I think we've done a very good job working collaboratively with everyone involved. Again, this is a framework. There's going to continue to be conversations, but our goals aren't going to change for protecting the tenants, protecting the historic preservation, and giving South Pass the ability to do affordable and workforce housing within the city's construct and control. Again, low and moderate income for LA County starts at 23,000 and goes to 64,000. Those are entry-level positions in many cases. We want to make sure that those folks have an opportunity to be good neighbors and have that opportunity to be our neighbors. Again, workforce housing, getting Caltrans out of the landlord business, protecting the tenants, and working collaboratively have been the overriding goals. Tonight, we're going to hear specific issues about 381. Christy Lopez from my office has been living with the 710 corridor going back to my time in the assembly, as most of the tenants who are on with us today. So you're familiar with my office and her. We try our best to represent the community and answer your questions. And I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight to make sure everybody knows what's really in the bill, what people think is in the bill and isn't in the bill, and what flexibilities we have and what issues we have. But this has been a very important public process and a collaborative process. And it's been a pleasure to work with everybody and all the interested stakeholders to get us to this point where we're at. So with that, welcome everybody and look forward to the conversation.
Hello, hi, thank you all. I'm going to be speaking on about the first 5 topics that are the first 5 slides that we're going to go over this
And
evening.
Christy, you are Christy Lopez from my office.
My name is Christy Lopez and I'm from the Office of State Senator Anthony Portantino, and as he stated earlier, have been working on this issue on his behalf since we were in the assembly. I am going to cover about the first 5 slides, and then after that, I will turn it over to Adam. So Adam, if you'd be so kind to provide me with the next slide. We're going to briefly discuss the timeline. And so there are timelines that are set forth within this bill for Caltrans to start the sale. And as you can see there, first and foremost, Caltrans at the beginning of January of next year needs to provide all accounting for the historic homes. We need to have the regulations, or Caltrans rather needs to have the regulations done by the end of the first quarter of 2022. And we have been assured that the rulemaking process for our bill will start within that quarter to make sure that we meet that timeline. By June 30th of 2022, Caltrans must commence the sale of the unoccupied properties, and then by 2025, the city and as an HRE will
120.
I'm sorry.
Margarita.
Maybe Lucy can mute that person.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
we'll take questions later. So just, keep going.
and then by 2025 in December, Caltrans, or rather the city, will need to have completed construction or acquisition, but this also comes with a 2-year extension, which could extend from 2005, 6, 7, 8 to about 2000 or 2029. So there are a lot of years in between that deadline. Next slide, please. We wanted to make sure that we went over the rulemaking process, especially as it pertains to the emergency rulemaking process, which SB 381 will go through. And as most of you know, SB 51 is going through the exact same process. But now we want to make sure that you guys have a clear understanding of how the process works and when and where and how you guys can comment for these bills. And so you will see that the rulemaking process is governed by Government Code 11349.6, paragraph B, which allows for a 5-day calendar or 5 calendar day comment period, which begins at the moment that the OAL posts the new proposed rules. There you can see where you can submit comment, the address. You can also fax it, email it, and also make sure that you email it to Caltrans staff, Caroline, whose email is at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. So after the 5-day comment period ends, the OAL has 10 days to review and make a decision. If they approve it, it goes to the Secretary of State to be approved or to be chaptered. And if the OAL disapproves, they need to tell us why that reason is. The emergency regulation becomes effective as soon as the Secretary of State chapters it, and emergency regulations can become permanent if the agency adopts them within the emergency period time. Next slide, please.
Sorry, hold on.
And Christy, it's important to note that the rulemaking process that just happened was only germane to the city of LA and some portions of Pasadena, had nothing to do with South Pass.
That is correct. Caltrans, as I stated earlier, states that the rulemaking process for SB 381 will begin in the first quarter so that we can make sure that they meet the March deadline. Our office will ensure that we are reaching out to all of the tenants via mail, social media, and email to make sure that enough notice goes out so that you're not surprised by the 5-day comment period. There are 2 places in which you can access the proposed rules once they're posted. You can go to the OAL website, or you can go to the Caltrans dedicated website for the sales, which is pictured on this slide. You can also access the process and where I got all of this information from directly from the the OAL website under the Emergency Regulations tab. Adam, I believe this is where you pick it up.
Thank you, Christy. Hi, everyone. My name's Adam Elison, and I am a housing consultant with the city. I've been working with the city and Senator Portantino's office and many others to address the Caltrans surplus property issue. I was actually with the city 20 years ago or so, and we were talking about this topic of Caltrans surplus properties. And it's exciting to see that some significant movement has finally been achieved, and hopefully we can all see the light at the end of the tunnel when Caltrans will no longer be in the housing business in South Pasadena. I want to speak tonight regarding some of the specifics regarding SB 381. We understand there's many questions that are coming in regarding the implementation process that SB 381 will go through. Some we can answer tonight, and however, out of respect for the process of continuing the community input process and our mutual desire to have local control on many decisions, we're gathering a list of policy choices that need further discussion. We want your feedback on what those policy discussions need to be addressed at an additional community meeting in the near future. Tonight, I'd like to give you the framework of SB 381 so we can better understand what and how we can address those policy choices later. SB 381 is not a mandate or a requirement forced upon the city, something we have the option to be able to pursue. I'm going to say a lot tonight the word city, but many times when I use that word city in my presentation, most of the time, what I really mean is that the city is going to pass along the option to purchase to another entity. And that's actually one of our policy choices, is what that entity is and who it is. Let me spend some time on this slide. We think we can divide up really the issue of the properties that are coming from Caltrans into 2 buckets. We got the bucket of the occupied properties, and we got the bucket of unoccupied properties. On the occupied properties, Caltrans will likely hire a third-party real estate company, as they have in the past. And that real estate company that's hired by Caltrans will manage the entire sales process of any interested tenant who wishes to choose to buy their home. The city will not be in the middle of that sales process with the tenant. The city will remain engaged and ensure that the process is moving expeditiously and help in any way possible. But Caltrans and their third-party real estate company will really be coordinating directly with the tenant throughout that process. We have indications that Caltrans wants to move quickly forward, and as much as possible, now that that process of moving quickly may not be the same expeditious way that the market moves, but it's also certainly going to be a lot faster than what Caltrans has done in the past couple of decades. One of the questions we often get is, what happens if an existing tenant, doesn't qualify or chooses not to buy? Well, in that case, the city has a first right of refusal to buy that property at the acquisition price and make repairs. One thing's abundantly clear on these tenants who don't qualify or choose not to buy is that these tenants will have an absolute right to remain in the homes. They will not be displaced. If the city doesn't buy, then it simply goes to another entity in the waterfall effect that I'm going to show you in just a little bit. I think it's been mentioned that several, already we've talked about several community policy choices that needs to be made, and those will be discussed again at a future meeting. Now let's go to that other bucket on the left side of the screen, the unoccupied. There's a total of 22 properties that are unoccupied. There's the category of single family residence. There's 17 of those. There's the category of vacant land, which is 2. One of those 2 is the existing community garden, which will remain as a community garden. And the second vacant land property is an unapproved property. It's residentially zoned. And one of the benefits of SB 381 is that the city is placed in first priority to be able to decide if they want to choose to buy that property. One of the advantages that SB 381 provides us, if the city does decide to pursue that property, is local control on that piece of land. Local control ensuring what gets placed on the property and what it looks like, versus allowing another entity to come in behind the city, purchase the property, and do certain things that might increase the density or change the use. So again, a policy choice to be made at a future meeting. The last category in the unoccupied is 3 multifamily properties. One of those is a locally historic property. In the multifamily category, whether it's occupied or unoccupied, SB 381 has a provision that allows us to work with Caltrans and work with the tenants to give them an opportunity to form some sort of ownership of the property in which they reside. A policy choice on the unoccupied is whether we want to do that with that property, those properties, or whether they simply remain as affordable rental properties owned by a city-sponsored entity or sold to another entity after the city elects to choose to buy or not buy. There's a lot of policy choices in the unoccupied area. Policy choices like, do we sell as ownership or do we rent? If it's rent, what kind of income categories do people have? The quality of the rehab, and there's many, many policy choices that we will decide with community input and council approval at a future meeting. One thing, let me see if I have anything else here. Nope, that's it. Let me go to the next slide. This slide was used in a previous community meeting. I just want to report back that the Reberti Act, as it stands today, talks about preserving and upgrading housing available for persons and families of low to moderate income. The state government, when they considered SB 381, had a specific priority to ensure that affordable housing is provided through the sale of the surplus properties. This slide was also presented at a previous community forum when we first started talking about SB 381. I think it was back in March and April. And I just wanted to report back that what our goal was and how and what we were trying to achieve, as you can read on this slide, was implemented and passed by SB 381. Establishing local control, ensuring an expeditious process to get Caltrans out of the business of housing, and ensuring that we have the ability to have quality housing in the future. The other slide that was presented, this slide in March and April, just want to report back. We had some objectives that we wanted to achieve in SB 381, and these are those objectives, the same ones that we had in April and March. The first one on the far left there is to create a priority purchase for all the current tenants. The slide after this is going to show you that process of the Reberti Act and how SB 381 enhanced one particular category that would never have had the chance to, a tenant category that would not have had the chance to purchase if it weren't for SB 381. So we achieved that in SB 381 by having all of the tenants be able to have an absolute priority right to purchase the property they live in.
Adam, you're muted. Adam, we still can't hear you. There might be something wrong with your system.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. It just, while I was talking, just automatically muted me, sorry. We're renovating the properties, we're restoring and maintain, we have a plan about restoring and maintaining the historic properties. We're going to build new residents on the vacant one property that we have that's vacant. And we're going to make sure that SB 381 includes making sure the properties in the future are managed and properly maintained. Next slide. Sorry. This slide is a repeat almost, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it does talk about this issue of the sale of the unoccupied properties. And when we buy it at an acquisition price and then sell it for some amount more than that, the money that is going to be achieved. Oh, sorry, this one, sorry, I got confused. This is the current tenants. Caltrans is going to take the purchase price less what they paid and be able to offer financing for the current tenants to be able to buy the property. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but that financing is going to be 100% financing for the current tenants who are income qualified. The next box is just to move quickly. On the unoccupied properties, we have a date now that the sale of those is going to commence in June of next year. Let's see, so this is just a repeat of what we just talked about, and I'm going to take the time just to go to the next slide. So this is the current waterfall, which shows these categories of tenants will have priority. And then you can see in category 4, the public and private housing related entity would have an opportunity to buy the property. And then this category is interesting. The present tenant in good standing, number 5, was behind private and public HREs, thus virtually avoiding the ability of them ever being able to buy the property. We were looking in SB 381 to move number 5 ahead of the city, the private and public entities. We were also interested in moving the city ahead of any housing related entity to be able to give them the opportunity to decide in a policy choice whether they wanted to buy the property. You can see now as I change the screen that that's exactly what we achieved. That present tenant in good standing moved ahead of these other categories. The city carved out their own category to be able to be in priority ranking, to make a choice if they want to buy a property. And then it goes to the public or private HREs behind that.
And if I could jump in with an editorial comment, that's significant. That was our goal, was to give the tenants that opportunity. And the bill was successful. And Christy, I also understand that Caltrans is going to be working directly with the tenants to help them all become tenants in good standing. Those who aren't, there's an effort to protect administratively as well. And obviously the whole point of giving South Pass more autonomy was to keep the decisions on the local level so you all could have direct input into that process as well. And I think those are really, really important accomplishments with 381 because that was the overriding goal. I mean, Christy in particular has been talking to tenants for over a decade, more than a decade, and we really wanted to make sure we did everything we could to help them. And then in second place, give South Pass more autonomy to be the local agency.
Thank you, Senator. And lastly, on this slide, we also created a whole new price category. You notice these were the only 3 categories that were in the existing waterfall and Roberti. In SB 381, we create a whole new category of acquisition costs. So that color means that the city of South Pasadena can buy a property at the acquisition price that Caltrans paid whenever they purchased the property. I want to go over some tenant occupied deal points that are in SB 381. Number 1, Caltrans, as I said earlier, is managing the sales process using an outside realty firm to handle the transactional details and the volume of properties to close. I think this is encouraging because we've all been concerned about the capacity of Caltrans to be able to manage that many properties. Bringing in an outside realty firm that partners with Caltrans, it's paid by Caltrans to bring in professional staff will really help, hopefully, to expeditiously move through the process. The offers to purchase will occur after the rulemaking that Christy spoke of earlier for SB 381 is finalized. That likely will be during the summer of 2022. Tenants will still have all the protections of Roberti, and nothing in 381 changed that. SB 381 did provide non-income qualified tenants absolute priority to purchase at fair market value that they didn't have before. Income qualified tenants will be offered 100% financing to purchase, and Caltrans will make repairs to those homes prior to closing. Caltrans will provide more details to the multifamily resident tenants to purchase the buildings in which they reside and create a form of ownership. And finally, the city will coordinate a tenant workshop by January of 2022 to discuss in more detail the home buying process. And we're looking at bringing in an outside organization that's a HUD-approved home buying counseling agency to help us explain that process of buying a home.
I think that's a really important point, that there's going to be efforts to help guide everybody through this process going forward.
Excellent. So now is your time. We're not done with the presentation, but where we are in the process of the presentation is we've covered a lot about the tenant occupied properties. We have more to discuss about the unoccupied properties and some additional SB 381 details, but we've covered a lot of material on the tenant occupied properties. And I'm going to turn to Christy and Lucy to see if we have any questions that tenants have shared with us that we can take some time right now before we continue in the presentation.
Thank you, Adam. We've actually gotten several questions, and I just want to remind everyone, you can type in your questions in the Q&A, and we will be responding to it either live or per question. We also have an email address, sb381comment@southpasadenaca.gov, that you can email to. I will start with the first question. We got several versions of this question, and I think, Adam, you addressed it, but if you can, again, highlight this. When do existing tenant occupied homes go on sale?
Yeah, our best guess is, of course, there's timelines, but when Caltrans starts it is not exactly spelled out. We know the rulemaking process that Christy described has some timeframes, but our best guess right now is details about an offer to purchase, your offers, I should say, to purchase, should be coming in the summer of next year. Any other questions, Lucy?
I do have one here. How does the bill define tenant in good standing? And this is not something that's defined in the bill. And maybe Chrissy, you can address this one.
Yes, the tenant in good standing, I was actually just looking through the legislation to be able to point to the section that speaks of it. But to my best understanding, a tenant in good standing is a tenant who has paid all of their rent. And so to Senator Portantino's point earlier about Caltrans working with tenants and putting them on payment plans, as long as you're on a payment plan, that puts you in good standing. And I know that there are some tenants who have been working with the department on some rental discrepancies. But tenant in good standing to my best knowledge, without being able to look at the actual code at the moment, is those that have paid their rent in full.
And I
Or
think
on a
that-
plan, or on a payment plan, right, Christy?
That is correct.
There's a question here. Are current low-income tenants now allowed to buy at the acquisition price?
No, Caltrans will determine what the affordable sales price is. And that is a formula calculation that will be shared with the tenant and determined later. And they also are offering income qualified tenants to make repairs to their home prior to closing. So can you buy the property at acquisition price? No, but Caltrans is offering it to you at an affordable price, and that price will be shared with you. You might see some details of what that price is in the rulemaking documentation that comes out whenever it comes out, it'll have details of that. And if you can read through a lot of codes and regulations, you can probably determine it for yourself. But at some point in the future, Caltrans will share exactly what that price is.
Next question, does Caltrans have authority to determine which types of properties have priority, or will it be governed by the Roberti Act, i.e. affordable tenants and single-family residential first, and then other types of properties?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So it sounded simple, but I missed it.
I believe it's just about the waterfall and when certain types of properties are sold. So,
Well, maybe the answer to the question is we've been told from Caltrans, they are processing all of the properties at the same time. I think the question might be, are they starting with a first group of properties, then going to the next category in that waterfall slide I showed? It's our understanding Caltrans is going through the process of all of the current tenants and making an effort to simultaneously offer them for sale.
Chrissy, if you see any other ones pertaining to currently occupied properties.
I will. I'm looking now while at the same time trying to answer specific questions. So give me 1 second while I read through them. There's a question, do South Pasadena residents who are not tenants get any sort of priority in the sales?
So Christy, I think that question is, let's say you're not a current tenant, but you want to buy one of the unoccupied properties that may come for sale down the road. Is that the question?
I can only infer. It sounds to me as though they'd like to know if residents in South Pasadena will be able to get some type of priority in the purchase of either the vacant home or the vacant homes when they go to auction, or the supplemental 45-45-year covenant affordable housing. Who gets to, how is the city going to determine how that happens?
Yeah, okay. So I'll take a stab at it. Of the unoccupied properties, you saw that there were 17 single-family homes. Some of them are historic homes, some of them are not. The policy choice, these are all policy choices we have to make later. Policy choices, which of those homes are going to be sold for ownership and which ones are going to be sold, or excuse me, will be rented. And of the historic homes, are all of them going to be offered at fair market value, or are some of them going to be offered at affordable? So all choices the community gets to make. We get to decide all that. We control that as a community. But is there a priority for South Pasadena residents? That also is something that's yet to be determined. that we get to establish. I will say, I've dealt with other communities that this question comes up often. Can our community have a priority preference? Our residents get a priority preference. One of the challenges we have to face is fair housing law. And so we'll be working closely to develop a process. If there are homes that are taken on by the city and then made available for purchase, or even rental for that matter, there will be some sort of process established that abides by fair housing law. We'll do our best to have a priority preference for the city. That might look like a lot of outreach and effort in the community to make sure the community is aware, for sure. And I've seen that happen in other communities. That's the best I know of right now. But again, more to come later on the details of the implementation of that, and the community and council will be involved in approving what that is later.
Okay, and I'm going to be focusing more on tenant occupied properties here. I have a couple of questions regarding the process for multifamily residential. Those are apartments, MFRs, and what the process would be for existing tenants of multifamily to purchase their home.
What's the process? Is that the question, Lucy?
Yes. Where do they fall in the waterfall?
Well, they fall ahead of the city. They get an absolute priority to move through the process of considering to form some sort of cooperative ownership, limited equity co-op, common interest, anything that would allow them to form some sort of entity that would basically buy the building and they would become owners or partial owners in that. I don't have the details of how that actually happens, but the provisions that we've ensured in SB 381 allow the tenants of those multifamily units, whether they're existing tenants or we have a couple of multifamily that are unoccupied, we have the choice to be able to choose whether that option is pursued. The tenants get to choose if that option is pursued. There's a lot of work, I imagine, that's involved to make that to happen. And I'm not the expert in how that actually occurs, but SB 381 provides a provision to allow that to happen.
Okay, Adam, regarding the income qualification, what is Caltrans going to be using to determine low or moderate income?
Can we hold that one? I have a slide coming up very soon that has the whole breakdown on household size and income. It'll show you precisely what that is. Hold that just for a sec, and you'll see it shortly. Thank you.
Will Caltrans still entertain transactions with existing tenants while the strategies for 381 and the rulemaking is in progress?
In other words, can a tenant buy right now from Caltrans before the rulemaking is done?
I believe that is what the question is, any of the pending transactions.
I mean, Christy might join me here. I'm doubtful that they'll be focused on that with all the work they're working on right now just to get the various bills to help the 710 corridor. I mean, Christy, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, what was the question? I'm going through the question and answer.
That's okay. I think the question was, can a current tenant living in a Caltrans property buy the property now before the rulemaking and SB 381 is implemented? Like right now, can we buy it?
No. We would have to wait for the rulemaking process to finish, and SB 381 came with an urgency clause, so we would have to wait for that to come. Well, so the bill goes into effect immediately when the governor signs it, and then we have to wait for the rulemaking process, and then Caltrans has to start the sales. And so no, one couldn't just buy it now because you don't have a conditional offer to sell from Caltrans yet.
Thank you.
I've seen a couple of questions related to when a tenant doesn't purchase or declines the offer to purchase.
Okay.
What happens to their tenancy?
Okay, so this is a current tenant given an opportunity to buy. Just understand, I know this is not answering a question. There's going to be a lot of help and assistance financially to help those current tenants buy. Details to come soon. However, if for any reason they choose not to buy or they don't qualify to buy, number one, they will not be displaced. In the waterfall effect, the city will have the first right to be able to work with their own HRE or community land trust that we've been talking about. Again, that choice needs to be made later as far as a city HRE that's existing or forming a new community land trust. We can make that later, but if the city sponsored entity, we'll call it, buys that property, then that existing tenant is given the absolute right, no matter what their income is, to stay in that residence that they've been living in.
So the
rent-
short answer to that is nobody's going to be evicted
Correct.
because they don't buy the house. There might be but the inability to buy your property does not trigger an eviction.
Correct. Thank you, Senator. If the city buys it, that's correct. If the city doesn't buy it and it goes to the next in the line, is like a private HRE, they have that same requirement. They cannot evict the current tenant. If it goes down, if nobody wants to buy the property, which is highly unlikely, there is the option later that it could be put up for auction, and then we're concerned. But I doubt that will happen given the nature of these homes, especially with a tenant living in it.
And I think even if it's put up for auction, you can't be evicted.
Yeah.
I don't believe you can.
There's a caveat there. If the property goes through all of the different priority orders and gets to the auction phase and it is purchased by an owner occupant, the tenant at that point will have 60 or 90 days plus Caltrans to pay them a relocation fee, but they've gone through every opportunity for them to be able to purchase. And if the city doesn't purchase it, if an HRE doesn't purchase it and it goes to auction and the tenant has elected not to purchase in all of the different phases, then at that point, Caltrans would pay their relocation fees. And they would have to vacate the property. And I forget whether it's 30, 60 or 90 days, but there's a time frame there for them to be able to benefit from the relocation assistance to find another place.
And there's significant safeguards through that whole process, and that's several years in the making. And as been said, it's highly unlikely that that will happen. And there are protections if it does.
Yes.
Lucy, you tell me, or Christy, you tell me when you're ready to go to the next slide. I know you're reading a bunch of questions probably, but just giving you the green light to whenever you want to tell me.
I think we can move on to the next slide as I can answer just about most of the open 39 questions.
Yes, and just everyone know, please, that if your question hasn't been answered, it likely is because Christy and Lucy are saving it to the end. We'll have another option at the end because we're trying to focus on the questions pertaining to the tenant occupied properties. We'll have another Q&A that's going to be at the back end of the presentation. So yes, let me go on now. And let me just talk about some additional provisions of SB 381. Some of them pertain specifically to, and most of them pertain to the unoccupied. So we've already mentioned the as-is price that the city has the opportunity to buy at. The city can elect to sell a historic unoccupied home at fair market value as long as 3 additional affordable housing units are created in the city. There's a variety of ways in which those 3 additional affordable housing units can be created in the city. They can be purchased, let's say an existing apartment. We can put a covenant on a unit and work with the owner and make a unit or 2 units in an apartment complex affordable. That might be one of the most reasonable and least expensive ways to create those units. There's a variety of ways that they can be created, but the main point on this is that the city gets to elect which of the historic unoccupied homes are sold at fair market value. And keep in mind, if the city does that and they're sold at fair market value, the difference between the fair market value price and the city paying for the acquisition at the as-is acquisition price Caltrans paid, can all that delta between that can all go towards helping create those additional units in the city. The city can use the surplus from unoccupied affordable housing sales or the historic fair market sales to create those additional units I just said. There are 55-year covenants for the affordable sales and a 45-year covenant to preserve affordability for the rental, it's 55 years. For the affordable sales and ownership, it's 45-year covenants to preserve that affordability on these housing units in the future. And finally, any construction improvements except those by the owners shall be hired at prevailing wage rates. So if the city and their HRE decides to purchase a property and make repairs to those properties, the work that's involved in that will be at prevailing wage rates for contractors and subcontractors to earn a living wage. I showed this slide on a previous community presentation, and we've since had some public comments of where are we getting the money to make this work, both on the acquisition side and the rehab and the operating. This slide just shows several different sources. It's not comprehensive. If you've been watching and following the news, there are new funding sources, even most recently in the last several weeks, that are being announced by the federal government that's going towards affordable housing. We know the state government is strongly supporting funding for affordable housing. And these other sources are all going to be explored when it comes to the capital part, the acquisition and renovation. And remember, if the city buys a property, they're buying at an acquisition price, and then there is if it's sold even at affordable price, there's a considerable amount of built-in equity that can be used to make the repairs. The operating and administrative funding would be in the case there are rental properties in the portfolio of the city HRE/Community Land Trust. The rents will help support some of the admin. And then there is additional affordable housing funds that the city will be having available that we hope will help support the admin of the Community Land Trust or whatever entity is holding the assets for the rental properties. So why are we having any discussion about affordable housing in the first place? Why should we even consider it in South Pasadena? Well, there's this thing called RHNA that is being discussed all up and down the state of California right now, standing for Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And the state basically tells each jurisdiction throughout the state how many new housing units they are required to be able to plan for in a community. South Pasadena has the following mandate housing unit numbers that you see on the screen here. And the city has to adopt a housing element that to its general plan that shows where these housing units can be developed in the city. And a draft of that updated housing element is currently available for view. I wanted to say that the draft housing element will be considered at the Planning Commission meeting on November the 6th. So it's coming up very quickly. And public comments to the City Council are being accepted through December 6, 2021 for this housing element that talks about this RHNA numbers that we have to do. So what's recently changed on RHNA is the penalties to cities if they don't comply. In the past, it's almost been ignored, these RHNA numbers. And now the state government is putting on some requirements to cities with penalties associated. Those last two bullet points really address that. And what can happen is if you don't abide by at least providing the housing units to be able to be developed in the city, it can lead to losing some of the state funding that comes to South Pasadena. And even more importantly, it could mean that the city loses local control on the approval of new housing developments in the city. So affordable housing is of great concern to a lot of elected officials and communities now because of mainly those two last bullet points. This slide shows what was one of the questions in our previous slide when we were one of the residents of the community asked, and this gives you a sense of the incomes, the household income to qualify for the various categories. And if I can point you to, first of all, these were updated since the last community meeting that we did in April. The State Housing and Community Development updates these figures once a year. They went up about 3% from the previous year, all these numbers. So a family of four, if you look right here, is in the on the moderate income category, can earn up to $96,000 and qualify. That same family of four at $94,600 is considered in the lower income category. And remember, our RENA numbers require these different levels of housing and populations to serve. What's unique about SB 381 and what we see in that waterfall effect is there's a category that's not typically talked about in affordable housing, which is that households can earn in the above moderate, is called, up to 150% of median income. And you can see what these numbers are here. And so what does that really mean in the community? Because we can look at these numbers and it's hard to determine what kind of household income that means. So we put together this list after surveying a couple of websites to give you an idea that all of these different jobs, the median income for these jobs are all below the moderate level. If you want to go up to 150%, it would open up a whole new category of jobs. But even at moderate and below, all of these incomes and all of these job types would qualify as affordable in the city of South Pasadena. One of the questions we got over the past 6 months or so is, what about all the property tax revenue that's lost to the city by having affordable housing? Because if these houses are held by a nonprofit, then likely they will be, then the property tax revenue is lost. And we know in South Pasadena, as many communities, the property tax revenue is your #1 source of revenue to the city. We've heard that. We wanted to analyze a hypothetical situation. So the occupied properties are going to be sold to the tenants, most of them. There's no stopping that. It gets sold, and we're not really here to talk about the property tax revenue loss of those properties because they'll be sold to the current tenants. And we believe the bulk of the current tenants will be qualified and move through that process, especially with the financing that's available. So when we look at the unoccupied properties, we're really only talking mostly about the single family residences, although the multifamily, depends on the circumstance, might be thrown in there. So again, this is not exactly, but I wanted to just give an example. And we know that some of those unoccupied single family homes are historic. And so we don't know how many of those are going to be sold at fair market value, which would capture the full property tax revenue. But just for example purposes, I threw out that, let's just say 3 of those single family unoccupied homes are sold at fair market value. They get the full property tax revenue basis, but the other 14 are put into a nonprofit and either sold at affordable price or rented at affordable rents. So down here at the bottom, you can see these 14 unoccupied. And there are certain the assumptions at the bottom tell you all of the detail behind this and how much of the property tax revenue the city collects. But at the end of the day, if 100% of the unoccupied 14 properties are put into a rental pool, the property tax revenue loss annually to the city would be almost $67,000. If half of those 14 are rental and half are affordable ownership, then it drops to 58,000. And if all of those 14 unoccupied homes are sold at affordable ownership, it's a property loss revenue of just over 49,000. So I hope this answers the question that many people had about property tax revenue loss to the city. We're almost done. This slide begins to tell the story of all those policy choices that we want to have with the community at another community forum. We spent a lot of time tonight giving you the details of SB 381. You've heard me mention that there are policy choices that need to be made by the community, and that SB 381 is a framework. The Senator talked about that as well. It's a framework. We designed it that way. We worked with the legislator that way so that we can take local control, so we can make those choices. This is just a beginning of really what we think are the highlights of some of those policy choices we get to make, and the SB 381 allows us to choose to do. And you can look through this list. I'm not going to read them, but you can see all of them here. If you don't see a policy choice that you would like us to consider, that we can work into a future community discussion, please add that in the chat, or you can email right here, this number, which will be on the next slide too, and share that even after the presentation. If you think of it tomorrow or over the weekend, please email us. We want to get all of your feedback so we can have a productive conversation and make some of these policy choices and make a recommendation to council for consideration. So thank you for listening to that long presentation. We want you to stay engaged. We're sharing on the screen now something Christy shared earlier, which is the SR 710 corridor website. It's full of questions, process, details. We encourage you, if you're a current tenant especially, to go there, read through that material. The city has a website that has a lot of information. We're going to, as we mentioned, have a future community forum and council meetings to explore these implementation policy choices of SB 381. You can email your questions here. Christy mentioned, I think, that we're going to be having another forum just for the current tenants regarding the home buying process on or before, probably in January. That's not listed here, but it's coming soon as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lucy and Christy to help us understand any remaining questions with the time that we have available. I think we're moving along quite nicely. We have a good amount of time to answer additional questions.
A lot of questions are coming up about maintenance and repairs. I want to make it clear that if someone is purchasing at affordable, Caltrans must make lender required repairs to those that qualify for the affordable sales program. Those tenants are also going to get a 100% financing product from CalHFA to be able to purchase. In regards to repairs for fair market value sales, homes are going to be sold as is, but Caltrans has stated that if the tenant gets their own inspection or their own appraisal, and it differs vastly from Caltrans, is appraisal regarding foundational issues, et cetera, that they would look at considering that when deeming the price. But there are a lot of questions that I think are for the city that have to deal with repairs once the city purchases these properties.
Yeah, and Christy, I think where that one might be going is, what's the standard that's going to be used on the repairs on the unoccupied properties? So let me break that into two. On the historic homes, we're going to work with the South Pasadena Preservation Foundation to be included in an inspection process that will go through each of the unoccupied homes and determine what level of not only the standard repairs, but all the different improvements that need to take place to meet certain historic ordinance guidelines that South Pasadena enforces. So SPPF will be a part of that process. When you're talking about the non-historic unoccupied properties, we will have that same inspection process that we have a third-party company that will be hired at a future date, a future council meeting, to inspect the properties and determine a complete scope of work. Before we even do that, though, there is a discussion that needs to be determined on the standard by which these homes are repaired. And that is also going to be in the request for proposal that goes out to the inspection company so that they understand what they need to build in on their inspection and scope of repair. So coming soon, it'll be part of our public hearing process when we hire the inspection company. Everyone will see that standard that's determined. Hasn't been determined yet, but we're working on it soon.
Adam, in relation to those repairs, a couple of questions here on how the city could afford or finance the improvements or the purchase of these homes, and if
Yeah.
rents would be sufficient to pay for those improvements.
Yeah, got it. Good question. So we don't know what the repairs are until we do the inspections. We've been talking a lot about inspections over the past several months. I think we're close to authorizing that to happen, perhaps maybe even at our next council meeting. But that being said, let me give you a hypothetical situation. It's pretty solid. We know that the median acquisition price of the unoccupied single-family homes, non-historic, actually includes historic, is somewhere in the $30,000 range. So wrap your head around that. The city can buy the unoccupied properties for a median price of somewhere in the 30,000 range, no matter, it's just a median for all of them. If it's sold at affordable price, that price might be, my best guess is it's going to be somewhere in the $400,000 range. The difference between 400,000, 425, whatever that is, and the acquisition price of 35,000 is all instant equity available for the city to be able to make repairs to the home. So there are financing choices I showed on a previous slide as far as how the city can use funds to be able to acquire the home and to be a construction loan product, basically for the city to utilize in the interim while the home is repaired and then ultimately sold, and then the city would be paid back that money through the proceeds of the sale. So some people have said, well, what if the repairs are a lot more than that? Well, again, we don't know what the repairs are. And as I said earlier, the city is under no mandate to buy any property. We get to choose that as we evaluate the repairs, what we pay for it, and determine a whole pro forma of what it's sold for, whether it makes sense for us to move forward. We hope that the whole portfolio of those unoccupied, it will make sense, but we won't know for sure until we go through the detail.
We're getting questions from folks that, from what I can tell anyway, are not Caltrans residents, but are asking about renting or purchasing some of the properties in South Pasadena. So essentially, will renters in South Pasadena be able to purchase a Caltrans home if they meet the income requirement and the 45, along with the 45-year covenant? Will they be able to purchase?
Yeah, so break that question into two, unoccupied historic and unoccupied non-historic. And we even have some unoccupied multifamily rental that will also be available. But when we talk about the single family historic, there will be some of those that are determined to be sold at fair market value, and a household will be able to buy that property. We haven't determined the process of how a buyer is selected for the historic unoccupied homes, but it will, my guess is it will likely involve some sort of qualifying criteria that has to be adhered to by anybody interested. And then there will likely be some sort of lottery that chooses people fairly. On the unoccupied affordable sales, because we have homes that will be in that category, same process, but the qualifying selection criteria will have some income restrictions to be able to be in that pool of consideration to purchase. We don't have the details yet spelled out, but I'm giving you just a flavor of how that likely is going to be worked out, but more details will come. Yes, we'll promote it and advertise it all over South Pasadena, giving everybody an opportunity, if you do qualify, to be considered for that. But we don't have the details exactly of how that will mechanically work out.
Adam, there's a couple of questions related to the replacement of affordable housing units. Guessing this is for when historic homes are sold at fair market, and how that process would work, and if there's an option to do an in lieu fee instead of creating the affordable units.
Well, first of all, no option for an in lieu fee. Caltrans, the state wants to ensure that affordable housing units are created. If you go back to the scenario, let's say it's unoccupied, historic, sold at fair market value, pick a number, any number for an example, say $1 million, that's a nice round number. City buys it for the same 35,000, fair market value is $1 million, then that delta difference can be used, whatever it ends up selling for, less all the repairs and everything else. Whatever that delta difference between that can be used to support the creation of additional units within South Pasadena. We've got several ideas of how the creation of the additional units can work. I mentioned one of them, existing apartment complexes where an owner might be interested in an affordable gap subsidy to covenant 1, 2, 3 units for affordable housing. Maybe they just in their good nature want to help out families that are fit the affordable housing category. We can subsidize that unit that's existing in the city, put a covenant on the property. The landlord would get some sort of amount to cover the difference in rent. It would be a lump sum amount. We could create new construction. There's a variety of ways to create it. The bottom line is Caltrans wants to know what our plan is specifically before we close escrow on a historic home that's going to be sold at fair market value. So,
And Adam, the only editorial comment I would say is it's not can be, must be.
yeah,
So
yes,
when you sell that unit at fair market value, you must use that delta to create 3 affordable units for the city. The beauty of the flexibility is that gives South Pass the ability to either build, buy down, create, purchase those 3 units somewhere in the city.
yeah. Yeah, exactly, Senator. It creates an affordable housing fund in essence for us to be able to use the way we want to in our city.
Correct.
Adam, can you go back and explain the difference? And again, I think you already touched it, but a couple of questions are still coming up on determining low and moderate income and affordability, and how that differs for the fair market value purchase. This is in relation to existing tenants.
Existing tenants, okay. Well, the way that this is in affordable housing world, they look at the entire income of the household. So anybody over the age of 18 that's working, no matter if they're on title or not, is part of that household income qualifying. So mom and dad mom and dad are tenants and they want to buy. They're the ones that are going to be on title, but they've got a 21-year-old son living at the home and he's got a job. In the calculation of what the household income is, it includes even the 21-year-old in there. So just be clear, this is the entire household income of everybody working in the home, no matter who they are, or what relationship they are. That's how they count household income. And as long as you are at that income or below, then you fit the affordable housing definition criteria. And there will be a process that each tenant, if they're buying a property, has to provide documentation to back up their income. That might be a tax return, W-2, payroll stubs, whatever documentation Caltrans requires, they're going to submit that. They're going to go through the underwriting and determine whether they qualify or not. I hope that answered the question.
On the vacant or undeveloped lot, what is the city's interest or thoughts on purchasing that lot? And would that create affordable housing?
So there is one vacant lot. It is RS zoned, and there is no determination on what will be done on that vacant lot. That is a policy choice that the city gets to make. Now, the benefit of SB 381 is we're put in priority before anybody else to buy that vacant lot. And as I mentioned earlier, the beauty of that is that now the city and their HRE get to control what is done on that lot. If the city or if SB 381 hadn't passed, there could have been a chance that an outside developer would have bought it. And if you've been following what's been happening in various bills, you could see an increase in density and uses and look and feel that you don't want in your community. So we get to decide in South Pasadena what happens on that lot.
Next question, what happens to a currently occupied home where a tenant does not purchase? Where does it go next?
Well, I think we covered that earlier. Tenants that choose not to buy. Yeah, we covered that, Lucy.
Okay,
Thank you.
There's a question about capturing all of the questions in the chat and if that will be made public later. I believe, Lucy, that we should be able to extrapolate
Yes.
all of these questions in post.
yes, we will.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, and if you guys could work in concert on the answers, that would be great. So Christy, I'm giving you more work to do.
No
But I
worries.
think-
I'm trying to answer them all as they come. So far, we've answered 64 questions with 30 pending. So they're coming in quickly, and I'm doing my best to listen and answer them at the same time.
But I do think that's a great question that person asked, that we capture all the questions, and then if we could put them on the city's website, you know, with the written answers, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. This question is in relation to the rulemaking process, and if language will be in there that supports that tenants would have first right to the purchase of these properties. It's a simple yes answer to that, but I just wanted to state it
Yes.
again.
Yes, yes, yes,
Absolutely.
yes. That's the whole point of the bill.
That language is already in the bill. Forget the rulemaking. It'll be in there too, but it's already in the bill.
That is state law. By the way, LA and Pasadena don't have that. Only South Pass does.
There is a question about a tenant's option to purchase at fair market value instead of low to moderate income. Could you explain this? I might be able to address this just a little bit. A tenant's option, a tenant can purchase at fair market value as is if they choose to do so. So I hope that answers the question. The question is regarding a tenant's option to buy at fair market value instead of low to moderate income has yet to be addressed. And so a tenant can purchase at fair market value with no covenants or no restrictions if they choose. However, if they income qualify, then they can apply for the affordable sales program and be offered Cal HFA's 100% loan financing product to purchase the home.
And Christy, I will add to that. Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. I will add to that. Before you make that decision, read carefully, and it'll be in the rulemaking for SB 381, what the resale formula is for the income qualified tenants who choose to buy. Read that really carefully and understand what that resale formula is and what length of time you have before you sell and what you have to pay back.
There's another question about who's going to, several questions have come up about who's going to make the repairs on the home if a tenant decides to live there but not purchase. So this would be the case where they possibly don't qualify as affordable, or they qualify as affordable but just don't want to purchase the property, or are fair market value tenants, and the city comes in as the public HRE who's going to make those repairs.
Okay, good. So in that situation, again, to be determined by the city with community input, if the city decides to purchase one of those occupied surplus properties with a tenant in it, tenant's not buying it, who makes the repairs? It depends on who ultimately buys it. If the city's HRE community land trust ends up owning it, the repairs would be made through likely a request for proposal by contractors who will have a copy of the scope of repairs that is prepared by an independent inspection company. A request for proposal would be issued. If it is a community land trust, the board of the community land trust is made up of South Pasadena residents. They would review all the proposals of general contractors that responded to that request for proposal. An award of contract would be issued, and that general contractor would do the work of one, two, multiple properties, who knows. But in general, that's what it would be. But again, policy choices. Is the city going to buy? Not required to. If they do, then we can go through kind of that process and choose to do that if we want.
Adam, just to piggyback off of that question, if you can go back to the slide where it shows the new waterfall.
Sure.
Again, when current tenants do not take the option to purchase their home, I'd like to show what happens next.
So if the current tenants don't choose to buy, is that
Correct.
it?
Mhm.
Yeah, so all of these are current tenants right here. And if they don't choose to buy, the city gets a choice to buy right here. And if they don't buy, it goes to the next in line, which is likely, I don't know if there's another public housing related entity that's out there. Might be, but for sure, there are private housing related entities that would likely buy if the city didn't buy.
And if again, the HRE doesn't purchase, then it goes to public auction.
Yes,
And all of that is controlled by Caltrans.
correct.
There is one question.
I think that's
here.
important because my understanding is the city would not be conducting the auction at that point. That's a Caltrans issue.
That's correct. Yes,
Though we seriously doubt if any properties will get to that point, but if it does, that's Caltrans, not the city.
correct. Yes.
Chrissy,
Sorry,
you had
looking.
one more?
I did have one. It's for the senator, but I think that it might be better for me to connect with that particular constituent in directly to answer that question. I guess there are also some questions about, and we might have already addressed this just a little bit, but when the city decides, who are you speaking of, what staff, your staff are, the city's short staffed already, and I think folks are kind of wondering how implementation is going to work.
Yeah, we've heard that from, and I'm glad that this question came up now so we can address that. So the vision is that the city really, as I mentioned a long time ago, the city really isn't directly going to be heavily involved in this. It's going to be a pass-through to a city-approved HRE, and revision, one of the options the city gets to choose is whether that city-approved HRE is a community land trust, with the community land trust being the asset owner, or at least involved in the process they would be hiring, for example, if there were rental properties in the portfolio, maybe some of the current tenants choose not to buy and they want to stay in there. The community land trust could be the city sponsored entity that would be holding the asset. And then through a request for proposal, the community land trust board would authorize the issuance of a property management company that's professional, known in the area to be doing an excellent service. And a contract would be established with a property management company that would maintain the quality of the home and ensure proper screening of the tenants when there's turnover. That would all be determined and dictated through a contract with that property management company and with oversight by a community resident board on the community land trust. So I guess that's the property management side. It's not going to be managed by the city. It's going to be managed by another entity. And the source of revenue to pay for that are the rents that are collected and an affordable housing fund that's available for the city.
Again, questions regarding the sequence of the sales. Is it the unoccupied, occupied, historic, single family? There's a little bit of misunderstanding as to the sequencing of the sales.
Yeah. So go back to that one slide where I showed you the occupied and unoccupied, and you got to divide it. You got to separate out what happens with both of those. And on the occupied properties with tenants living in the property right now, Caltrans will be working directly through their real estate company to sell those properties to the occupied tenants. That process, again, is going to start, rulemaking will go through, and then there'll be other steps, and then offers maybe sometime in summer of next year, and then the close of escrow and all the financing, that'll all be worked out. That's a separate process. Caltrans overseeing and getting the tenants to purchase their home. On the unoccupied properties, Caltrans has fast-tracked the unoccupied properties at our request, and in SB 381, we place that language in there to ensure that Caltrans is moving quickly, and they can because the city is the entity that's being considered to buy those properties. We don't have to buy them, but if we do, that commencement of the sales is summer of next year, June of next year. That's when the commencement starts. It's kind of vague right now as to when we close escrow, but let's just say it's the summer. But all of that process is separate from the occupied properties, and it'll move quickly once we get a hold of, if we can move quickly on the inspection and get the, all the details worked out in the community land trust and all these policy choices, then we have a plan that's in place for those unoccupied properties to quickly go through the process of either having them sold or rented and repaired and everything else.
I have to apologize to a few folks. I have hit send before I typed, so it's been confused. I'm old, and navigating this system has been a challenge. There's been a couple folks where I've hit send before I've typed, and then I can't figure out how to go back to that question. So we will make sure that all the questions get answered. There's some folks who, please put your questions in the chat so we can get at them, and forgive me for being inartful in how I deal with the chat. I've not been very good.
Lucy, we're coming up on that hour-and-a-half time limit, and I know we need to kind of wrap it up. And I would just encourage any of the people still on the call to put your last-minute questions in before the Zoom call ends. We've got a couple of minutes, but I know that there were some wrap-up comments that the city wanted to do. And if you have any other questions, we've still got maybe one or two questions.
I actually, there was a suggestion here, which is valid, and it would be good to reiterate an upcoming meeting that we are planning. So the suggestion is about separating the occupied process and the unoccupied process in future meetings we hold with the public. And again, as Christy mentioned, and as Adam mentioned, we are working to bring on a housing expert to talk to the current tenants and provide some resources and tools, a HUD-approved counselor, potentially before January or sometime in January.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep. Just for the tenants. That'll be that separate meeting just to cover their process. Yes.
I'm going to step in. I've been told it's time for our closing remarks. Having listened to the discussion, the presentation, and scrolling through the questions, it's really apparent that this is a really, really sensitive issue. And now 90 minutes wasn't enough to answer all the questions. So I certainly am going to encourage everyone to please continue posting your questions. And we will be answering all of the questions. We'll have it posted on our city's website. We'll have this presentation also posted. And the bottom line is we need to work together to get to the solution. From everything I understand, and pardon me, I'm with the city for a few months, but I can tell in the short time I've been here, this is a really important issue. And the properties in the city have been a long-standing challenge, and we're trying to get to a solution, and we can only do that by working together. Senator, I want to thank you for taking time to be with us tonight. And I know you were trying to navigate the chat. We appreciate it, and we appreciate Christy's help. We will certainly be working with her to continue answering the questions. And what I encourage the community to do is please keep the questions coming. You heard Lucy mention we have an upcoming discussion coming at our council meeting on November 17th. We ourselves are trying to understand all of this. We want to work with you. We want to give you good information, and we want to do our best to put the message out that we're here, we're trying to help, we're trying to line up the resources. And I really think the senator and his team have done a great job. We've got a number of resources lined up to help our tenants. Thank you for everyone's time. This is a conversation starter. We will have more of these discussions. I encourage you to please get involved, send us your questions, and do not hesitate to contact any of our staff members. We've posted the email address and we'll continue to do so. We want to hear from you, and we want to put the facts out. I think the goal is to put out good information to our community. Senator, I don't know if you had any other last minute thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, please take this opportunity to type in your questions. Christy, can you put your email in the chat as well, so folks have it? Because she's available as well. I'm going to be in South Pass on Saturday. We're going to do some demonstration of the new technology on leaf blowers and whatnot, and community bike ride. So, feel free to come talk to me on Saturday. I think it's at 10 o'clock in the park. There's more dialogue, more, this is a process, and it's your process. We really want to get it right. And we really want to empower the city and protect the tenants.
Thank you all.